thanks. So our next session is going to have two presenters, and the overall session title is Place-Based Storytelling as Participatory Design Practice. And we're going to start with Rachel Switzky, who is the inaugural director of the Siebel Center for Design at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She has over 20 years experience as a global design working with Fortune 100 companies. So I'm excited to hear your presentation today. Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. Where's Danielle? Thank you, Danielle, for having me at Design Forge 2023. I'm getting over COVID. I'm not contagious, but I might cough, or I'm trying to project. So just giving you a heads up. So yes, I'd love to talk about the evolution of the University of Illinois' Community Engagement Lab during my speech. So just introduction, thank you very much for the lovely introduction. I'm Rachel Switzky. I'm the director for the Siebel Center for Design at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Just a quick introduction to Siebel Center for Design. Our mission is to practice, model, and teach design thinking using human-centered design in order to reimagine our campus, our community, and our collective world. So just a little bit about my journey to Siebel Center for Design. I started at the University of Illinois and got a BFA in industrial design back in the 90s. And then I went into exhibition design and working with the Smithsonian and the Cooper Hewitt at the National Design Museum in order to put my design skills to more experiential practice. Went back to the University of Illinois, a double alum, and got my MFA in industrial. Specifically engaged in thinking about at the beginning of the internet and looking at human-computer interaction, and then went into design consulting around human-computer interaction, working at Razorfish, which is a big digital agency around the world. Then went to IDEO and started practicing around much more upstream in terms of design strategy and practice, and spent a little over a decade at IDEO for a significant amount of time on the West Coast. And then heard the calling back to academia, back to the University of Illinois to start up the Siebel Center for Design. So I'm now in my 5th year of running the center. So here's our beautiful center. We've got a nice space, and it's we invite everybody to come visit us. Yay, come with us. A point of the Siebel Center for Design is we are a campus resource. So we report up to the provost's office, and we are for all at the university. If you are not familiar with the University of Illinois, a little information here, our total enrollment is close to 60,000 students, and there's a mixture of undergraduate and graduate students here. We have 15 colleges at the university and about 11,000 faculty and staff. So there's a lot of scale at the university, which is why I was very, very interested in coming to the university, having practiced design thinking and human-centered design within these Fortune 100 companies. I really wanted to take ownership within my own organization, something that was able to have tremendous impact at this type of scale. So again, SCD's priorities: establish this foundation of design thinking content, integrate design thinking across all of the college curricula, and then more culturally is just creating a human-centered university. And thinking about the culture change required at that scale, thinking like, how is it that we are going to be changing hearts and minds in doing the above 2 bullet points to create this human-centered university? So does anyone know what this is? This very hard to read document. Because this is another thing that as I came to the university, this became quite important. This is the Morrill Act of 1862. And this informed the designation of the University of Illinois and other land-grant universities across the US at the time to reserve land for the creation of these universities that provide this education to the states. Now, again, as a side note, we could talk in another conversation about the land that was taken from the people who owned it before it was grabbed by the governments in order to designate these land-grant institutions. But we'll bypass this for the moment and talk about how the University of Illinois now, 150 years later, they very much take this land-grant status to heart. And we have land grant, we have the proclamations and all that in order to acknowledge where the land came from. But this is something that thinking about the flagship university and the purpose of the university in that it's to enhance the lives of the citizens of the state. And having been, I was born in Nashville, but having been brought up in Illinois, have a very much connection into not only the scale of changing the culture of the university, but how is it that what we're doing at the university through the Siebel Center for Design, how is it that we can have impact through this great state? And then from that, can we have more impact into the nation and then impact into the world? So those are the driving factors of not only the scale of our university, but the scale and impact by the placement of who we are at the university was very exciting for me, and that's why I took this position. All right, that's all my journey and background stuff. So let's now get into the meat. All right, my presentation is a case study, and we've got some moments that are based on time. May 2020, I don't need to explain this point to you. This was a very big moment within our American history, and very painful for all of us. And this triggered a lot of activity for good, as we know. So I'm using this as an entry point into how we even got started thinking about a community engagement lab. So I wanted to introduce these key collaborators of mine at the university. In our Chancellor's Office for Public Engagement, Dr. Wanda Ward and her Associate Director, Candace Turner, and then Dr. Danita Brown-Young from Student Affairs Office. They came to me after George Floyd and the protests and pandemic and all this just nightmare situations. They're like, what can we do? What can we do from a human-centered design perspective? They were like, we need to act fast. Our community is hurting. Not only our campus community, but our community around our campus is hurting. Help us think about this and think this through. And I was like, yes, what can I do to help out here? And we sat down, and this was unbeknownst to me when I first entered academia, but it was important to write a white paper to be able to state what our intention was. Now, again, white paper, I was like, okay, we need to write this white paper, and then it circulated. I see people laughing, but it wasn't a 6-month writing of a white paper. It was like a 1-week exercise that was explaining how is it that we could be creating more of a campus community collaboration that could be helping improve and dismantle all the terrible systemic racism that was in place in our community. And then how could that inform and inspire the rest of the state? Again, that land grant status. So rolled up our sleeves and got that written. Now, I just want to point out another little digression here in terms about the history of the University of Illinois. So we have Champaign, we have Urbana, and we have the University of Illinois centered in the middle of these twin towns. Right now, the population of this area is about not quite 250,000. But there are decades upon decades upon decades of the University of Illinois abusing its community and using the community in not the right ways and conducting research and studies that were not good for the community, but were good for the University of Illinois, and then running away. I was shocked by this coming into the university system and being like, why is there homelessness? Why are the schools terrible? We have these amazing resources within the moat of around the university. It was not being expressed in the ways that it could have in order to have a much more relevant and beautiful ways to be fruitful in what we're doing at the university to help our community, help our state. So just giving you that background of decades of distrust and decades of just terrible behaviors by the university that Dr. Ward and Dr. Brown-Young and the folks up at the community engagement or public engagement and Chancellor's Office were very much like, we need to fix this. So that led to the creation from our white paper to a campus community compact to accelerate social justice. And this was a group that was brought together from members of the university, driven by those key collaborators I mentioned before, who are just the most badass women on campus, and then them bringing together stakeholders across the communities, both in Champaign, Urbana, superintendents of schools, the people who run the park districts, of course, the mayors, people who run public health, all these incredible people in these leadership positions who came together and said, yes, let's create this compact to change things. So from this group, we were able to decide upon these focus areas. And these focus areas you can see in here are listing these different types of themes that had, again, these cross-cutting issues that we were going to research as well. So what was exciting here was for us to be thinking about not the usual suspects, but the unusual suspects, to bring them to the table and have these collaborations between both community members and people at the campus who could be thinking about and working together along accessible technology, community relations, economic development, etc. So really exciting to kind of like hit the ground running. And Dr. Ward was like, now, we need this now. So I mentioned that I was at IDEO. I know there's some other IDEO folks here. IDEO recently created a campaign that said, "This work can't wait." That just was released in the last several months. And I saw that, and it reminded me of our Campus Community Compact. And Dr. Ward in that fall of 2020 was like, come on, focus groups, let's get it done. And, you know, we gave the focus groups like the autonomy to like, you know, hey, come together and put together your vision around what needs to happen for economic development, what needs to happen for accessible technology. But what we found was that they liked talking, and they talked in theory, and, you know, people were collaborating and meeting on like a weekly basis, but they needed more guidance and structure moving forward. And Dr. Ward was like, oh, because she really wanted to have something by like the end of the fall in 2020. And we realized that we were kind of behind schedule. And while this work can't wait, she came to me and said, how do we create a little bit more structure in moving things forward? So my team and I, we started creating some just like very kind of lightly guided workbooks and activities that could then help the focus groups, focus areas move forward on finalizing visions and priorities, and giving some examples around visioning statements, and providing a little bit of guidance and timelines and milestones and office hours to, you know, just to give a little bit more structure moving forward. So we started creating these and introducing these concepts, some, you know, from design thinking, human-centered design, to provide that type of structure. Here's another one as well, developing long-term initiatives and giving like, oh, you have this much time, and hey, here's some brainstorming rules to consider. Here's some other like activities that we like, you know, laid out for them. Again, this room is going to be like, totally recognize this. But for these focus areas, this was, you know, this is not typical tools that they use. So just bringing in some of these participatory type of design tools and techniques in order to start getting things going and providing that structure to move things forward. 2021, and giving these deadlines to the focus areas, they were able to create all their content to parity and have everything put together and be able to then present back to the Campus Community Compact stakeholders. And, you know, here's just some goals where it was like, develop a strategic evidence-based approach to combat systemic racism in our community, you know, this outcome, thinking about both short and long-term plans. What are we going to do in the first year? What are we going to do in 10 years? And come up with these initiatives and these projects. And like, this was a wonderful moment in, I think it was about like August of 2021, where it was like, oh my gosh, look what we've done. You know, in this year, it took a year. Wanda Ward wanted it to be 3 months, but it took a year. But this was amazing. It was amazing. And we were all like, ta-da, awesome. But then that's when shit gets real. And the focus area people were like exhausted, and this is like they had their like day jobs. We all had day jobs, but everyone was putting this aside because this work can't wait. We had to get this is stuff that needed to get done, and we needed to do it together. So the focus area leads, they were all like, can we just take a break for a moment? And that's fall of 2021. And the shit get real moment was, I went back to Dr. Ward and Dr. Brown Young, and I'm like, can I bring in some more senior talent in order to help us bridge between what was created from the focus areas and the compact working groups into an action plan. This is the kind of upfront design strategy work that just needed a little bit more heavy lifting in order to synthesize it to help the group moving forward. And I brought in some people from my network, amazing people from my network, who I would not have been able to get this work done without them, Scott Weiss and Melanie Kale, who would be a welcome conversation into this room. Maybe we invite them next year. So, but they created work like, critical clarifying moment and kind of like laying out some of these patterns that we heard and thinking about things moving forward that we need to be putting in place in order to set ourselves up for success in this next phase of work of this campus community compact. Thinking about like these hubs that we were talking about and placing around the community and giving some very explicit timelines in here. First 6 to 11 months, this is what we need to do. Then what do we need to do? Amazing kind of just like really good sort of strategic action plan to be given to the leaders of the compact in order to move forward. And then, looking at these ways in which we could be creating taxonomies and criteria around different projects and prioritization. And again, just like beautifully worded and lots of like just great content to move forward on. And then importantly to me, them recognizing how Siebel Center for Design was acting in this capacity of a community engagement lab and providing these tools and support to be thinking about how do we continue that moving forward? What does that look like? And how do we, yes, we have this engaged community in these focus areas, but how is it that we continue to build in a feedback loop in order to continue to have our pulse on community conversation and community empathy? So what does that then look like? So this inspired me then thinking about how do I now, as this is moving forward in the spring of 2022, where the Campus Community Compact leadership is now taking this like 100-page strategy document and now disseminating it and figuring out how do they put their plan in place for the next year. I myself did the same and started thinking about these ways that I could create these like exhibition and community conversations at a very low cost, accessible level. So my team and I started working about this like, this mobile boards that these pieces on the bottom they designed that could have these criteria that we set up in terms of one person could be able to use this from the focus areas to like take this board and use it as like a way to be able to do like post-its and synthesize and listening on a very specific topic area, easily transportable, and it can be put on around your shoulder. And we were like, amazing. But then we're thinking, okay, well, as a standalone product, and we wanted to kind of put this in the library or in the community centers around the community, this could be like easily tipped over and somebody could get hurt. And we were like, that's not durable for like a public engagement type of way. So the team started thinking about ways to design like an accordion style, and again, low cost and lo-fi was the manner here. What we did figure out was we couldn't use Post-its and we couldn't use Sharpies, which again are like the key language of my people and you people. And so, but we found, we were talking about the transportation hub, and they're like, do not bring a Sharpie in here. They're going to draw all over the walls and the upholstery. And we were like, okay, design loves constraints. Can we think about chalkboards? So we started leaning on like, oh, is there chalk paint? Is there chalk adhesives? So that's what you kind of see here, and how we started thinking about these like poster boards and things. So this is my team kind of building this out, and we had these decals that we put up. And here you see this is in a, it looks desolate, but it actually is a quite used mall in Urbana. And this was a place that we started trialing these out. And my team was, they placed this, they have this is showing it just installed. But you can see in here, people started writing on them. And my team would come in and they'd photograph it, and then they would erase it. Then they'd come back the next day, they'd photograph and they'd erase it. And we made it just easily accessible for people as chalk. And of course you get like the occasional irrelevant comment or, penis drawing or whatever it is, but it was still, we wanted engagement, and we were getting engagement. So this has now been traveling. We have a couple of these. They don't cost, it costs like $200 or something to create. This has been traveling around, and we have this in like another mall. We put this in the libraries and the community centers, and we can now have this. Right now it's covering all the different focus areas, but we could be tailoring this for other. So that's kind of covering the kind of the way in which we were doing public exhibits and being able to get people to, from a kind of like self-serve perspective, provide their voice. But we also started doing these listening sessions, and again, rolling up my sleeves from design consulting with our focus areas and thinking about how to design different types of agendas to facilitate conversation. And what was it like? This is just an example of one that's coming up, where I was working with thinking about feeding Champaign County, and it's a cohort of people around the county and talking about food shortages and ways to make sure that people are getting food that they need. And as I'm working with these different organizations, everyone's like, "Oh, can you facilitate this, Rachel? You're such an expert." But I'm like, I am maybe famous on my campus, but no one knows me in the community. I was gone for 20 years. I have no roots. I have no trust. And you see people here on this other side of the slide, Sam Smith in our community. He's part of the community and he's part of campus. Oh my gosh, seeing him lead the health equity with Karen Sims down here, who's a trauma expert in the community, my gosh, the two of them together were amazing facilitators. And I'm just sitting back like scribing, right? Like I have no voice. I have voice in the community, but I'm not a person that would be good for this. Same thing with like J.R. Lill, who's part of the Champaign Community Health. And he is now associated with the Feeding Champaign County. And I was like, you can do it. So there's this aspect of not only helping from how it is that we've been leading this from a design thinking perspective, but not only helping on how to set up people for success within the agenda of these sessions, but also how are we also training and teaching people to be facilitators? How are we training in getting the community comfortable with participating, et cetera? And then I couldn't do any of this without Bev Baker, who's the lead of our United Way, who is like the pillar of our communities and has so many relationships to build off of. I'm just kind of in her shadow in the background, kind of like, helping out. So again, I just wanted to give shout outs to these folks. So again, where are we now? Spring 2023, it's Thursday the 30th. You can see this is dated 2 weeks ago. I asked Candace, hey, what's going on with the formal hiring of a community engagement lab lead, formalizing this community engagement lab? I've been the lab lead, but I have a day job as the director of Siebel Center for Design. But look I'm waiting for HR to send the draft job posting before it goes on the site. Yay! Look how far we've come 3 years down the line. So very exciting. How am I doing on time? Good. So just some quick lessons learned to wrap this up. Patience, which I have very little patience, but as I know, having done systems change, and I'm sure I'm looking around the room here of other people who do systems change, it's very hard, long work. And to make system changes, systemic change in our world, especially with how messed up our world is, to dismantle, oh my God, this is a whole other long story, but it takes patience, and it's one tiny little step at a time. The need for agility, again, Dr. Ward's like, I need this in 3 months. Let's change the whole dynamic of the community in 3 months' time. And I'm like, you know what? We need to shift gears. We need to listen to who our change makers are, and we need to adapt to what their needs are and be okay with that. Acknowledgement, not only from the land grant perspective of our predecessors who own the land, but acknowledgement of the people who are doing the work. Those focus area folk, like the leads in our working groups, we were about to move into the next phase of work and action planning, and we were like, oh, Dr. Ward, you need to send a note out to profusely thank all the people engaged in this. And it just wasn't on her mind. She was just like, all right, let's move forward. But those types of small acknowledgements where everyone's contributing, you're talking earlier about like, how do you get people to like have a voice in these conversations? But then like thanking them for their time is just, it goes a long way because they're not getting paid. So again, little goes a long way. Just like little, like I'm a perfectionist, I worked in consulting for so many years where you're getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to like do the absolute right thing. Here, we're working fast, and it's a big, 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 gnarly challenge. And I'm like, you know what? And I'm like, oh, I don't have time for this. But you know what? An hour spent with J.R. Lill to help him kind of imagine how best to get the most out of that Feeding Champaign County listening session. It's like, after that, I'm like, oh, that was such a well-used hour, for example. And then finally, you can't please everybody. This is, again, from the first one, systems change is hard, long work. When we started presenting in these listening sessions, you know, the first thing we'd hear from the community, how angry they were that this was the first time they've heard about the Campus Community Compact. And we're like, we know, but you gotta start somewhere, you know, and not everybody can come to the table at the same time. But thinking about, and I don't have an answer for this, maybe you guys do, but like that ripple effect of being able to continue to engage people and not have them feel left out is still something that I'm like, I don't know how to deal with this yet. So would love to hear that. Anyway, thank you very much. And I think I've got